Recently, a photo appeared online showing what looks like a warning sticker attached to a PlayStation 5 box. Allegedly, the label tells buyers that new physical PlayStation games will disappear after January 2028, while discs released before that deadline remain playable. Immediately, the internet reacted with its usual calm maturity, meaning thousands of people began screaming before breakfast. First, here is the necessary reality check. VGC could not independently authenticate the photograph. Second, no other customer had verified the label when the report appeared, and nobody knew whether every model or region would receive it. Unfortunately, Sony's underlying decision needs no rumor, because the company officially confirmed that disc production for all new PlayStation releases ends in January 2028. Worse, Sony continues selling consoles with disc drives while preparing buyers for a future where new releases eventually stop using them. Nothing says confidence in premium hardware like attaching an obituary to one of its major features. Today, we are not repeating the exhausted headline about physical games ending. Instead, we are examining why one unverified warning feels completely believable, what Sony's confirmed policy removes, and who benefits when every future sale enters Sony's digital system. Crucially, the real mystery is not whether one photograph survives inspection. Rather, the mystery is why Sony created a policy so absurd that the alleged sticker sounds believable before anyone has even authenticated it. Consider the sales pitch. Initially, you pay extra for the machine with a mechanical disk drive. Next, you build a physical library around it. Finally, Sony announces that the flow of new games designed for that drive has a retirement date. Brilliantly, backward compatibility now arrives bundled with forward irrelevance. Somewhere, an accountant is replacing the word ownership with engagement and receiving a bonus for innovation, while buyers wonder what they paid extra to preserve. Besides, the warning label is not even the most ridiculous part of Sony's plan. Before we open the patient, press like, subscribe, and support the channel, because YouTube's algorithm needs more reassurance than a collector reading Sony's latest corporate statement. Right, back to the corpse. Officially, physical disc production for every new game releasing on PlayStation consoles will stop from January 2028. Importantly, titles released on disc before that deadline remain unaffected, existing copies will not suddenly fail, and compatible older games should continue working. Likewise, Sony has not confirmed that a future PlayStation 6 will lack a disc drive. Speculation about that possibility is reasonable, but presenting it as fact would only give Sony an escape route from the policy it actually announced. Nevertheless, the confirmed decision already contains enough stupidity without importing rumors from an imaginary console. Publicly, Sony describes the transition as a natural response to customer behavior because digital purchases now dominate the market. Translation: people selected digital sometimes, so the company interpreted that as permission to eliminate physical forever. Nobody remembers voting in that election. Conveniently, the ballot offered one option. The counting happened privately and tighter platform control won by a landslide. Digital games obviously provide convenience, instant purchases, preloads, and freedom from changing discs. Yet convenience never required extinction. Removing one option does not create flexibility, merely because several retailers can sell the remaining option. Corporate language can transform any subtraction into progress when the announcement contains enough blue gradients and the word ecosystem. Somehow, Sony's solution makes the problem even stupider. Picture driving into town and visiting a game shop. Inside, you select a plastic case, pay for printing, packaging, transport, storage, and shelf space, then carry the magnificent object home. At home, you open it, discover a paper code, and download every byte through Sony's servers anyway. Congratulations, mankind has invented the physical digital game. Miraculously, all the waste survives while the ownership benefits are removed for efficiency. However, the empty box is merely the comedy section. Physical copies give customers practical powers that digital licenses often cannot reproduce easily. Owners can lend a disc, share it with family, resell it, purchase a used copy, compare shop prices, collect editions, preserve builds, or give the game without transferring an account. Those functions matter because value remains with the customer after the original payment clears. Meanwhile, digital access may last for years, but it normally cannot be traded, lent, or resold like an object sitting on a shelf. Consequently, ending discs does not merely eliminate plastic. More accurately, it also weakens the awkward secondary market where Sony receives nothing from the second transaction. Britain's Entertainment Retailers Association criticized the policy over sharing, gifting, collecting, preservation, trade-ins, resale, and reduced consumer choice. Predictably, those benefits sound less exciting during an earnings presentation than digital growth and operational efficiency. Now, examine the disk drive already installed inside millions of PlayStation 5 consoles. Imagine buying the disk edition during Christmas 2027, paying extra for the mechanism, then discovering that the following year's new releases will never enter it. Technically, the hardware remains operational. To the buyer, its main future purpose has been retired. Essentially, Sony sold a toaster while announcing that new bread production ends next year, although existing slices remain supported. Inevitably, breakfast has entered a digital-first transition. Defenders may point out that modern disks sometimes require patches, servers, downloadable content, or online authentication. Fair enough, physical ownership is not perfect. Even so, an imperfect ownership tool is not identical to having no ownership tool. One disk may still contain playable data, enable installation, support resale, encourage retail competition, or preserve a version beyond a storefront listing. When digital becomes mandatory, every new purchase depends more heavily on accounts, licenses, downloads, storage, regional availability, infrastructure, and Sony's future decisions. None of that transfers more control to the customer. In defense, Sony would argue that disk manufacturing, shipping, retail inventory, and unsold stock cost money, while downloads remove much of that friction. That explanation shows why the decision benefits Sony, not why customers should celebrate losing an option. Separately, Sony announced that new purchases through the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita stores will close globally in July 2027 after earlier regional closures. Previously purchased content is expected to remain downloadable for the foreseeable future. Still, placing every future release inside one digital house means Sony owns the doors, maintains the locks, writes the rules, and decides when renovations begin. Customers receive access, the platform retains authority. Evidently, people noticed the trick. Backlash extends far beyond 10 collectors arguing beside sealed copies of NAC. PlayStation's announcement attracted more than 1,000 comments, while the opposition petition climbed beyond 300,000 signatures. CFO Lin Tao acknowledged that players held strong views and said Sony understood the community's reaction. Management heard the anger, measured the anger, thanked everyone for the anger, and continued with the decision causing the anger. Listening now means allowing customers to finish speaking before ignoring them. Honesty would sound much simpler. Downloads reduce manufacturing complexity, weaken resale competition, and place every future purchase inside Sony's preferred pipeline. Strangely, corporations discover customer demand most enthusiastically when it aligns perfectly with corporate convenience. Credit where it is due, the long notice gives retailers, publishers, collectors, and players time to prepare. Furthermore, a genuine warning label would place the deadline where buyers could actually see it. Sadly, transparent bad news remains bad news. Advance notice does not turn fewer rights into better service. Underneath this questionable photograph sits the larger issue of who controls a game after the money leaves your account. Collectors watch the shelf eventually stop growing. Families watch lending become an account-sharing problem. Used buyers watch another affordable route disappear. Retailers watch physical price competition lose another weapon. By contrast, Sony loses none of those things. Ownership becomes access. Products become licenses wrapped in legal terms nobody reads unless insomnia has defeated every safer option. Choice disappears when convenience becomes compulsory. Following the disappearance of discs, Sony no longer needs to persuade physical customers that digital is better. Exclusivity merely requires leaving one door open and bricking up the rest. Symbolically, the alleged sticker compresses Sony's strategy into one brutal image, a drive inside, a warning outside, and a deadline overhead. Whether the photograph proves genuine, regional, experimental, or fake changes the reporting angle, but it does not erase Sony's confirmed direction. Earlier games remain unaffected. Existing drives remain useful for compatible discs. Future PlayStation hardware remains unconfirmed. Inventing overnight disk destruction would only help Sony avoid the criticism it actually deserves. Describing the real policy lets the absurdity perform unpaid overtime. Economically, this decision may succeed for Sony. Behind the strategy sits an exhausted philosophy: replace durable products with controlled access, remove friction for the seller, and market the loss as liberation. Customer ownership becomes permission rented inside somebody else's ecosystem. Massive corporations adore loyalty until loyal customers ask them to preserve something inconvenient. Soon, history becomes overhead, ownership becomes engagement, and community becomes a comment section to acknowledge before proceeding carefully. Surely, everything will be fine. After all, no digital platform has ever changed terms. closed services, removed listings, increased prices, or reclassified yesterday's permanent feature as today's strategic burden. Ask yourself whether you would buy the next PlayStation if every meaningful new release existed only behind Sony's digital gate. Some buyers genuinely prefer downloads, and that preference is entirely reasonable. Others value discs, resale, lending, collecting, preservation, and competing retail prices, which is equally reasonable. What becomes unreasonable is pretending the removal costs customers nothing. Players lose a purchasing format, shops lose physical competition, families lose easy lending, collectors lose future releases, and used buyers lose another cheaper route. Conversely, Sony gains a cleaner pipeline and tighter control over every new sale. Balance that exchange honestly, and the winner becomes painfully obvious. So, what does the alleged warning really represent? Put simply, the hardware still works, the customer still pays, the retailer may still stock a box, but every future purchase travels through Sony's preferred gate. Clearly, the sticker is not the scandal. Really, it is the receipt. Ultimately, Sony sold people the drive, scheduled the end of new discs, called the result consumer choice, and may now be printing the deadline on the package. Play supposedly has no limits, apart from the limit beginning in January 2028. Would you still buy a future PlayStation without meaningful physical releases? Tell me below.